Good morning and happy Friday. Welcome to another segment of Mornings in Elmira. I am here with John Knight, who is an artist. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. Why don't we start out just by telling me about yourself, just where you're from and where you are, like up to the point where you're at now.
How long do we have? I grew up in New England, Connecticut, Vermont, and then went off to college in Ohio and ended up in Ohio for a few years, and then went back to school, got a master's degree, and then ended up in Syracuse.
Okay.
I was in Syracuse for about 15 years or so.
Oh, wow.
And then moved to Tennessee for another 13 years in Nashville area. And then eventually I got a job in Horseheads at First Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
And so that's what brought me back to this area. My wife's from Penn Yan, so this was sort of coming back.
Back home a little bit closer?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I love living in Nashville, but it got tiring after a
while. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So your journey as an artist, when did you say you really started to get into art?
Well, probably about 25 years ago, I started doing some pastels, just really abstract stuff, and it was just for me. And I was single at the time, and so I had time, and so my dining room table was just full of stuff that I was doing, And then it came and went, but working doesn't allow a lot of time to really do art, and so it's after I retired about 6 years ago that got a studio over at Park Church upstairs, and started just doing what I wanted to do. The wonderful thing about being retired and doing this is that I don't have to make money.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of pressure off. I mean, there's always that little voice in your head which says, how will people look at what I've done? But I try to get rid of that because it really doesn't matter to me that much if it sells or doesn't sell. So that's helpful anyway.
Yeah, and so was there anyone, when you started getting into art a little bit 25 years ago, was there any inspiration or what you just use it as an outlet?
It was more of an outlet. Nashville is not just country music, by the way.
Okay.
It's all kinds of music, great music, and jazz and all kinds of stuff, but also a lot of visual art. Some fantastic stuff. And so I started going around looking at the art, and that's what got me going.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just being able to go to different places, different studios. We had a tour that lasted a whole weekend one time, and you went to different studios and got to know the people. And things like that really stir the juices and got going. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's
all right,
good.
well, I'm excited to learn more about you and all your artwork as well. So thank you so much again for joining me.
Okay, thank you.
Stick with us, more news and weather coming up after the break. Well, why don't you start off by telling me just about the pieces that you're currently standing in front of? What are they?
Okay, this first one here is, it's called Abandoned. And actually, I got the idea out of a picture in the New York Times years ago of nursing home situation. But I painted it originally in that color. And then as we got into the pandemic, I began to realize that everything was gray and black. So I wanted to depict the aloneness, especially people in nursing homes during the pandemic, and the aloneness that even people outside of that felt. So it came out of that, just sort of a deep feeling of that. And at that time period, I was painting several things. Another one would be this one over here, which I call it Coming or Going. And basically, the idea behind it is, this is in the middle of the pandemic, and are we heading toward the light, or are we seeing where the light was and we're heading out into darkness? And so it's just a sense of aloneness again, which myself, certainly I experienced a lot of that. Everybody was experiencing that. I live right downtown, and it was really weird. Everything shut down and it became a ghost town. And that's kind of where all this stuff, the emotions came from before that.
Yeah. So did you produce a lot of pieces during the pandemic? Anything that you felt, feelings and emotions?
Yes, I kept painting, and a lot of the stuff was junk. Got rid of it, painted over it. But it was dealing, not because it wasn't just the pandemic, it was also the whole political thing and the whole environmental thing. All that stuff just sort of, it was a lot of questions. Where are we going? And so that really took a hold of me, and I had to express it some way. It was a kind of raw emotion sometimes coming out on canvas.
And seeing, you know, taking those emotions and then painting them and seeing them in front of you, just what is that like for you when you get a finished piece? Just how does it make you feel?
When I finish a piece, I have this moment of saying, oh, geez, now what am I going to do? Sort of like, you know, the baby's been born, now we're going to do, you know? I mean, so there's always almost a sadness when I finish a piece, but also step back and look at it. And often painting, and you step back and say, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. You know, and so you go back and you work on that and change it. And quite often that happens after a time of being away from it also. Walk back in the studio and there it is, and you say, oh, that's what I got to do. To just help. So telling, you know, when to finish, that's always a big question for most artists. When is it over? Because you can ruin a painting and keep going too. So.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm excited to learn more, so thank you again for joining me. And stick with us, more news and weather coming up after the break.